Good morning. Good morning. I'm Reverend J. Wolin, the settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. I want to especially welcome our guests today, whether in person or on YouTube. Please feel free to sign in on YouTube. Go to our website, and there is a banner. You can sign in, register to get our newsletter, or right outside at the table outside the sanctuary. As well, we have coffee and desserts outside after service, and so we can get to know each other better. As well, outside, you'll notice there were tables set up with volunteers from many of our committees and teams, and so we call that an information fair, so that you can find out what some of our teams and committees are doing, and maybe how, if you're interested, in engaging with them. So now I would like to call up John Yoda from the stewardship team, who will be making an announcement.
Good morning. When I joined UU of Sarasota 8 years ago, I realized I'd get to know more people as friends and get more involved in the life of the church if I joined one or more small groups. I joined a men's group. I joined a group of volunteers that helped extend our UU presence to Lakewood Ranch. Today, I'm a member of the caring team and the choir. I've learned that giving my time and talent to these groups is both personally rewarding and powers the church's larger mission within our community. I also learned that the church actually needs me, and I need it. And it needs you too. I invite you to make some time in your busy lives to join one of our small groups, and the committees set up outside today give you a great opportunity to learn more about them. In this year of transition for our church, as our church reaches out to its members and the community at large in so many ways, we need your time, talent, and yes, your financial support more than ever. Our beloved UU of Sarasota, made up of our community of small groups, can't exist without your financial support. If you've already returned your pledge card, thank you. If you haven't, I'd ask for you to do it today. Our President Bill Payton gave me a note before I came up this morning and said that for all of us that make pledges to the church between now and between the beginning of our pledge campaign and Friday, there'll be a drawing, and 2 lucky winners. One will get a gift certificate to the bookstore on Pineapple Avenue, and the other a gift certificate to Duval's Restaurant. So I hope you'll join me in pledging to our great church. Thank you.
Just a couple other quick announcements. After service today, we will be if you want to join the church. We just had 5 people after the first service, but after the second service, if you would like to join the church, we invite you to come to the minister's office, which is in the building opposite the sanctuary, and meet with someone from the board membership and myself to sign the book. And lastly, I just want to give a special shout out to Catherine Bada. I thought she was there. She goes. And as well Miriam Schneider, if she is here. But they were the ones who organized this great dance and karaoke night last night. Intergenerational. Yeah, please. It was phenomenal. But I will not be singing up here karaoke today. And so now I invite us to rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, number 108, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. Our opening reading today is from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship. No eternal optimism or clarity of conviction. No boundless courage or endless experience. You do not need to know what brought you here, or how you will solve that problem you are turning over and over and over again in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Well, I don't know who has checkbooks anymore. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not have been working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be already perfect or even halfway to belong in this circle, where grace meets us where we are but does not leave us as it found us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. Come, let us light our chalice together. Please join me in saying the words of affirmation, which are printed in the order of service and on the screen behind me. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Thank you, George, for lighting our chalice today. So, this month's theme is vulnerability, and so I'm going to start off by sharing something vulnerable about myself. I love to dance, and I feel like I may have manipulated a whole bunch of you to come dance with me last night. Yes, yes! So, this topic is a really hard one to find a children's book about. First, vulnerability comes in many different forms, obviously. You know, we have physical and emotional and psychological and in relationship with each other. And children's books don't really talk about that. They will talk about the emotions that we equate with that, like being scared or making mistakes, of being ashamed, or even embarrassed. So I looked to the guru of vulnerability, that is Brene Brown, and she defines vulnerability as this. The definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is our most accurate measure of courage. So using that as a guide, I did find a book that I found was fun and funny and resonated with me in all the ways that we were vulnerable together. It is a comic book, and it is the story of the author, or the artist, Jackie Davis. It's her story from her diaries as a young adult through adulthood. And her courage to be out there and be authentic is very inspiring. So here are some vignettes from her book. Vulnerability is my superpower, an underpants and overbites collection. Vulnerability is my superpower, but it wasn't always. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I probably would have said silliness was my superpower, and then made kind of a boing boing noise as I hopped away. Moments later, though, I would have hopped back anxiously and asked, did I say something wrong? Are you mad at me? Do you like me? Because really, self-doubt was my superpower, or maybe it was my super deficit. Either way, it all brought me here. So how did I go from being super doubtful to super vulnerable? Gradually, painfully, sloppily, and perfectly. And often with a pencil in my hand and a therapist on speed dial. There were a lot of factors on this journey, and the process is ongoing, but something about making a diary comic was the key for me. Hey, it wasn't even locked. I keep waiting for permission. Permission to try something new, permission to take risks, even permission to make mistakes. It's like I'm in line waiting for someone to say, "Okay, kid, you're up next." But the longer I wait, the more I wonder, what if the only person that can really grant me permission is me? I want to start a revolution because making art is lonely. Heck, being alive is lonely. But you don't have to do it alone. When you're alone, you're vulnerable. Buy this and you'll be happy. Oh, okay. But when you're alone, you're scared. And I don't mean alone time. I mean times when you feel completely alone, like you're on a desert island and everything you try to say feels like another message in a bottle. You know, TV and movies make friendships look so seamless, but real life friendship is anything but. That's what makes it real. My revolution is to reach out to people, to play more, to take risks. My revolution is when it feels like everything is a message in a bottle, to not forget that I have a boat. Asking for help is really hard. Admitting I need help feels like I'm admitting I'm broken. And I don't want to be broken. And if I am broken, what if I can't be fixed? But I'm starting to realize asking for help doesn't mean I'm broken. It means I'm brave for knowing what I need. And there's nothing broken about that. Oh dear. Vulnerability is my superpower. I'm so strong, I don't need to pretend I'm strong. And the more I share about myself, I'm vulnerable. And the more it can connect other people. Hey, sometimes I feel vulnerable too. Now that's pretty super. Your V fell off. And I can see your underwear. At a coffee shop recently, the barista handed me my coffee. Here you go, thanks. And he also said, also, I read your comics, and I've been meaning to tell you, they make me feel less alone. Well, it's things like that that make me feel less alone, including each and every one of you. Okay, you can go now. So, on that note, I'd like to invite our younger UUs to join me in the West Wing before we go into class where we further explore this topic with them. Thank you.
Who knows what tomorrow will bring? I am here now, being and doing what I can to live and love life in whatever way it is provided, all the while knowing it will never be enough, and all the while knowing it will have to be enough. And so I open myself to the possibilities the universe presents me. So when the bell rings, answer in whatever way that you can. And when we have the courage to open the door to possibility. Life awaits us with all of its joys and sorrow. Walk through that door and live. As we go into our moment of silence, I encourage you to contemplate and imagine all the possibilities that still await you to live and love life. This is the unexpected, right? We'll come back to Spirit of Life later. So, what does it mean to be on the path of vulnerability? Like just now, thinking about what am I going to do to rearrange the service now? Choosing to be vulnerable as a path towards gaining wisdom seems sort of counterintuitive. You know, my lived experience growing up in the Bronx in the 1970s taught me that vulnerability was a weakness. Being smaller and less physically gifted than my peers, I was subject to attack by neighborhood, how shall I say, delinquents. I was debating whether to use the word ruffians, but I guess that is an old-fashioned word. When I rode the subway into Manhattan, I was subject to random violent attacks. And when I was hanging out on the street corner, which this was before they had malls, so we used to hang out on street corners. And if I angered the wrong person for any reason, which usually ended up having to do with their ex-girlfriend liking me or something, I ended up, again, being subject to violent attacks. And all of these experiences gave me a terrible sense of fear and vulnerability. And since I did not want to be subject to violent attacks, and I did not want to stay inside my house for the rest of my life, which was not really feasible, I had to learn to protect myself. Right? I learned not to travel alone on the subway. I learned how to make allies with some of those delinquents. I learned how to negotiate with people. I learned how humor can de-escalate a situation. I learned to trust only my closest friends. I became guarded with my emotions, my speech, and my actions. My ability to protect myself literally kept me alive. The challenge, though, of these early formative experiences in our lives is when our circumstances change, often how we react to emotional triggers do not. Times in my young adulthood whenever I felt vulnerable for any reason, even if it had nothing to do with my physical safety, these protective measures would pop up. Guarding my emotions as well numbed me to the entirety of the emotional side of my life. Because when you shut down your bad emotions, right, you end up shutting down all your good emotions as well. And then at some point in my life, I just realized surviving was not enough. Right? I wanted to live fully. So I started on the arduous path of vulnerability. I decided to risk the safety of being accepted, to risk the safety of being successful as defined in the world I lived in, or to risk the safety of certainty, no matter how limiting that was. It was Unitarian Universalism that provided the environment and the community in which to be vulnerable, to figure out who I was, and more importantly, how I wanted to live in the world. One of the most important lessons I learned from Unitarian Universalism was to discern what my values were and why they were important to me. Once I determined my values, I knew what I was going to risk. Whereas in the past, I might have felt vulnerable of losing my job if I disagreed with the owner of a company I worked for. But over time, despite being vulnerable, I gained the courage to speak out. And when I disagreed with my supervisor, especially when I thought they were doing something that was contrary or inconsistent with my values. Acting on values despite vulnerabilities does have risks, though. That is a reality. We do need to understand that there are consequences to being vulnerable. And therefore, I think it's good to take steps to limit the impact of potential consequences. But one of the ways I did this was always by living well below my means. This allowed me to be free to speak out, even if it meant losing a job. In most cases, my outspokenness, whether on business practices or personal conduct, would earn me the respect with business owners and members. Other times, when people in positions of authority were insecure, let's just say it earned me some hostility. However, in all cases, it strengthened my self-respect. And we have to be comfortable with who we are, right? We have to learn to be uncomfortable with the uncertainty of outcomes. We have to learn not to seek approval from others, but from our own conscience. Now, over time, as I discerned my values, I knew I had to find a different career. I felt very vulnerable leaving a successful career that I knew well. Instead of protecting myself, I followed a new path, and despite the risk, that choice made all the difference in my life. Once I allowed myself to be open to change, to risk the uncertain, to speak my truth, to value myself, I was able to find my way. I was talking to someone just the other day, and I said, you know, as the youngest of 3 children, I could barely get a word in at the dining room table in my household. And so it is with some irony that I now found my way to a profession where I can talk for 20 minutes and no one will tell me to be quiet. At least not yet. But once I learned actually to speak my mind on issues that were important to me, I had to find a profession where I was able to voice them and act on them without constantly feeling vulnerable. It's important to find a community where you can fully be yourself. You can question traditions, right? In Unitarian Universalism, this is the place where you can truly and fully be your whole self. You can question traditions, traditional beliefs, traditional roles that people assign to us, right? Traditional ways of doing things. Now, you don't have to discard what was still meaningful to you from your past, but you can incorporate your past and explore and include new ideas that are meaningful. It takes courage. It takes courage to do things that might cause other people you know to reject you. It requires you to be okay with failing sometimes. Not every experiment works. Some paths lead to a dead end. But even so, you need to know that your community, this community, will always support you no matter what. And that is my hope, that each of you will find that in this community, the ability to be vulnerable, to try something new, to see your life and the world in a new way. And, you know, if you see, as Catherine talked about Brene Brown, I mean, if you've ever, she has like a YouTube video that has like millions of hits, and she's written many, many books, but she often speaks about being vulnerable as a path to wholeheartedness, right? She suggests that we lean into our vulnerability. She writes, and I quote, "Vulnerability is the core of shame, fear, and our struggle for worthiness. But it is also the birthplace of creativity, joy, love, and belonging. And the way we get to that birthplace," she says, "is with courage." And she suggests we not deny our vulnerability, but rather to embrace it. She goes on to write, and I quote, "You must have the courage to tell your stories with your whole heart. The courage to be imperfect, the courage to be authentic, and let go of who you should be to be who you are. Vulnerability is not about winning and losing. It's not. It's about having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is our greatest measure of courage," end quote. So each week I come up here in front of you and I speak my truth. In some way, I hope, in some small way, it comforts, inspires, educates, or moves you. You can always be certain, though, that it will be authentically what I am saying, will be authentically what I believe in that moment. I'm always willing to be open to new learning as we expand our consciousnesses by learning together. Additionally, each week I come up here with uncertainty, never knowing who will and how much you will give for our offering each week. so that we can reach our goals as a congregation. But each week I still go forward with faith that you will be as generous as you can be as we now take our offering. For those online or on your cell phones, you can give via there's a link in the description of our YouTube channel. Let this sacred time begin. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? No. So the next reading is an excerpt from a speech called Citizenship in a Republic by Theodore Roosevelt. I've adapted it to add gender-neutral language. Many years ago, probably when I was in my teens, I saw a little scrapbook of quotes and readings that I found inspirational. Of course, now it's, for the last so many years, it's been on a computer, but this was one of the first ones I taped into that notebook. It is not the critic who counts, not the person who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and great devotions, who spends themselves in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly. So their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And now, one more time, we have Carl Hahn. Also, just a reminder, if you would like to experience the choir, even just for once, they are practicing for the April for Easter. So if you just want to try it out, we want to invite you to join the choir at least once. You can check with somebody from the music team. They have practice on Thursday nights. And thank you, Carl, for your playing today. Really appreciate it. Carl is, Don is on vacation this week, and so very lucky to have someone with Carl's talents here as well. So we are certainly living in vulnerable times. We are. The state we live in is the epicenter for forces that are trying to ban free speech, to ban abortion, to ban books, and now it seems to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, when I told people I was accepting a call to a congregation in Florida, they wondered why I would pursue that path, considering all the political turmoil here. But, you know, my answer was actually very simple. First, this is where a strong Unitarian Universalist presence is needed most. It is more important now, more than ever, for us to voice and act out on our values and our vision in the larger community. Second, it is a very strong congregation, a congregation that likes to have fun together. Last night, we had a great dance and karaoke night, and just symbolic of the fun that we have as a congregation. And as well, this congregation is committed to social justice. And the third reason I gave is, well, you know, they do have great weather and beaches there too, you know. But one thing I discovered when I was on my path of vulnerability was that if I showed vulnerability and took risks, it modeled that behavior for others as well, right? When we see others taking risks, we too are more willing to take a risk. And I will tell you, I witnessed others modeling vulnerability for me last week that inspired me. Last week I went to a rally to support new college students. So for those who are unaware, the governor of Florida has appointed new conservative trustees to the new college board of trustees. This board then subsequently fired the president of New College and then installed a new president who received significantly higher compensation. The new board then closed the college's diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Now, the majority of speakers at this rally were students, and they are ones who are in a vulnerable position. Yet one after another, they spoke. They spoke passionately, eloquently, defiantly even, I would say, about why New College is meaningful to them and why they object to the changes that are happening. And despite the governor stating that he imagines students are receiving degrees in zombie studies, he actually said that, which personally I kind of think, how cool would that be, huh? I mean, really, because, I mean, if you think about it, it's really a study of human physiology and viruses, but that's another story. But each of these students are studying typical majors like neuroscience and sociology and computer science. I think it's telling that the governor in that same speech is calling for, and I quote, the requirement of educational institutions to prioritize graduating students with degrees that lead to high wage jobs, not degrees designed to further a political agenda, end quote. Now, I want to say it's perfectly acceptable, right, to go to college to get a degree that will lead to a high wage job. However, there are many non-degreed positions in the trades particularly that lead to high-wage jobs as well. And as well, I think our society needs to demonstrate the value needs to demonstrate the higher value of some degreed positions, such as teachers and social workers, by paying them a higher wage for what they deserve for the work that they do. Yeah. For me, the purpose of education is to become educated, right? Not to get a job. I mean, that could be an outcome, but the purpose is to become educated, to create a discipline of how to learn, to think, how to think critically, right? This is exactly what New College does. Our principles call for the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So let us make sure we keep the responsible part of searching for truth in higher education. It is not responsible to ban books and courses of study or lines of historical inquiry just because they do not fit in with your ideology. The governor claims he wants education but not indoctrination or ideology, yet really what he wants is to indoctrinate students with his conservative ideology. The governor's new higher education plan permits the governor's appointees to review and eliminate tenure of professors at any given time. Thus, it makes academic freedom and inquiry secondary to the ideology of the governor and his appointees. The governor has called for the elimination of all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in higher education. And these are the very values that our religion stands for. And I just always wonder, what is it that they fear about inclusion? What they fear is that the future of America looks more like the students of New College than it looks like Ron DeSantis. The one thing that makes New College stand out was on full display at that rally. They are intentionally inclusive. The students there are white, black, brown, they have purple, pink, and every color and shade and style of hair that you can imagine. Right? They not only welcome, but they embrace people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. And yes, I've heard the complaint. It is true, they don't give out grades, okay? But they have high expectations of their students, and New College students have great success in the world, get into graduate school easily, win Fulbright scholarships. These kids are smart kids, and we need to recognize that, and they deserve to have a place where they want to study in the way they want to study. One of the students who was speaking said, "We are not going anywhere," right? They've started a fund to build a grassroots support to save the intentional diversity and intellectual freedom of the school. These students put it all on the line, knowing that everybody was watching. They are worried. They are, and legitimately, I think, worried for their safety. But still, they stay and fight for the values in which they believe, for their vision of a better world. And so I ask, what will we do? What will we do? Will we stand by while the governor puts these young people at risk for his political agenda and ambitions? What will we do? What will we risk? In what ways will we be vulnerable? And it'll take more than letter writing. Will we talk to our conservative friends and tell them we disagree, even if it might risk losing a friend, right? Will we speak out publicly against this attack on students and education? Will we march? Will we utilize our power and privilege to support free and critical education? Do we maybe have to create alternative schools where critical thinking is taught? You know, the one thing I found was very interesting. New College was actually started by the United Church of Christ in 1960. So these are religions started that school. I do not have the answer. I do not. right? The future is uncertain. But I invite you to be vulnerable. It is not without consequence. It is not. But please remember that there are also consequences to doing nothing. So I leave you now with the words of Florida State Representative from District 42, Anna Escamani, who also spoke at the rally. And she said, and I quote, "We envision a world where joy is abundant, diversity is our strength, ideas are debated with critical thought, not partisan bias, where problems are solved, not created, where we choose calm over chaos. The world, this is the world that we want. This is the world. That is the world we envision, and that is the world we fight for every day. May it be so." I invite you now to rise. Thank you. I invite you now to rise in body and or spirit for our closing hymn, number 346, "Come Sing a Song with Me." Our closing words are from Wendell Berry. "It may be when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings." Please join me now in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Thank you.